Let's go! Jake PEETZ, DJ Mangus. How big of a disaster has this hire been by Ed Orgeron? The answer I'm going to give you today is probably not what you think, okay? So stick to it. I got something really good for you at the end of this video. Let's go!
Hey, Coach, when you hired Jake PEETZ, he's obviously a bright guy, a lot of NFL experience. Would you, reflecting on it, maybe want a guy with more play-calling experience, or do you feel like he's been learning on the job at all, or how do you look back on that?
You know, the one thing I did was trust Joe Brady. That was, I wanted his offense. I wanted somebody who could run it. I knew that'd be a learning curve, and there's a learning curve, but that's also why I hired DJ. DJ's he's in charge of the third down. And look, those guys are new. There's a big learning curve. Was it a mistake or not? I won't say it was a mistake. But they need to do a better job, and they know that. I think the outstanding men, every time I get to work at 6 o'clock, they're there.
So was it a mistake for Ed Orgeron to go with what Joe Brady recommended? The answer is yes, but a more complicated no, because there is something Ed Orgeron failed to do that nobody is talking about that just absolutely blows my mind, because we all learned something very, very interesting this weekend. But first, let's discuss the thought process. So LSU, of course, had the greatest offense of all time in 2019, and Ed Orgeron wanted to bring back a Joe Brady-like play caller. So he brings in DJ Mangus, who was the passing game coordinator assistant to Joe Brady in 2019, and he was, of course, with the Carolina Panthers, along with Jake PEETZ, who was the quarterbacks coach and previously the running backs coach with the Carolina Panthers. So the first thing is, I would say yes, it was a mistake, because Ed Orgeron himself has never called plays before, and hiring on both sides of the ball first-year coordinators and just overall LSU's coaching staff doesn't have all that much play-calling experience. In fact, some of their analysts have more play-calling experience than most of their more senior officials. Just in general, LSU's coaching staff lacks experience. So, yes, it was a little brash to do something like this. And look, there have been some really shaky moments during the Jake PEETZ, DJ Mangus era this year. I look back on this season, and I can only point to, of course, one moment or one game where Jake PEETZ just dominated a Power 5 opponent with play calls, and that was the Mississippi State game where he was masterful. He figured out that the counter was not only effective in the run game, but showing counter looks in the passing game made their play-action game so effective. Also, the UCLA game, I mean, he's just had some holy crap bad calls this year. The screen to Cole Taylor versus UCLA was atrocious, led to an interception. The red zone play in the first half versus Ole Miss was the worst red zone fourth down play call I've ever seen an LSU coordinator make, and the list goes on, including that ridiculous Wildcat, which, according to EPA, was by far the most costly play of the game, not only in terms of analytics and just the turnover, but also it stopped Garrett Nussmeier's rhythm when he had completed 3 passes in a row, one of which was a touchdown to Jack Besh on the drive before. So, yes, that was just really, really, really bad play calling right there from Jake PEETZ. Ed Orgeron is still to blame for this offense, and this following story from Tom Hart and Cole Kubelik is going to blow your mind.
So it leaves 3rd and 1 now. Oh, what a difference this will make to the play calling for LSU. Williams finds just enough of a hole for a first down. And talking about play calling for LSU, Jake PEETZ is the offensive coordinator for LSU. There's Jake. But when it comes to 3rd down, the play calling generally falls to the hands of DJ Mangus. This is something that most teams don't do. There's DJ to the right. And Jake said, you know, if it's a running down, I still handle it. But, yeah, it gets out of my hands when it comes to a passing down on 3rd.
You say most teams don't do that. I've never heard of a team.
It is rare.
Yes. So, and we actually have spoken to a couple other offensive coordinators about the possibility of that taking place and got some weird looks.
Well, the thought
ask the
was
question.
that during the national championship season, Joe Brady handled most of the third downs. Maybe he was calling more plays than that. But Ed Orgeron liked that setup so much, why not run it back?
This is the most undertold story about what has gone wrong with the LSU offense. Before I continue, Ed Orgeron was not asked specifically about these comments from Tom Hart and Cole Kubelik, but I'll get to the media aspect of this in just a second. Full disclosure, don't get it twisted. Okay, the LSU offense is, of course, very limited. And as I've said, Jake PEETZ has had some really rough moments. And it doesn't help that LSU doesn't have elite quarterback play, and the Miles Brennan injury, and the offensive line issues, and the lack of imagination and run schemes, and just overall mess. Don't get it twisted. Those are all very important reasons. However, I want to dive deep into what you just heard. Okay? Ed Orgeron is forcing something that was a unicorn, which was the 2019 team. And this is just another layer of what made this offense truly a one-of-one offense. Because I've done the same thing as Cole Kubelik has done. I've spoken to multiple offensive coordinators at different levels of football, one of which I spoke to about an hour on this topic yesterday when I was driving back. This is pretty unprecedented, and it's uncommon. Now, look, third down calls being called by someone else. Look, we don't know who called which plays in 2019. I've been told that Ensminger called most of it, but the bottom line is that just worked because, number one, Ensminger's very experienced and he doesn't really have an ego whatsoever, and he's very easy to work with since he was the tight ends coach at LSU during the Les Miles era. Also, it helps that you have Joe Burrow and legit some of the greatest offensive pieces you will ever see at LSU. So that just covered up a lot of it because when you have a quarterback that has 95 QBR, he's going to make a lot of offenses look really, really good. So the fact that Ed Orgeron could not figure out that 2019 couldn't be recreated, and I would guess in 2020 LSU did a very similar thing where Ensminger would call first and second down and the third down and red zone, which I do think this was the case, was called by Scott Linehan. Now, understand that it is not uncommon for other coaches to suggest the offensive coordinator do something different, or the head coach, or whoever it may be. So, kind of like with what Ole Miss does with Lane Kiffin and Jeff Lebby. So, those two, of course, have worked a lot together, and that still is a little bit different. But this is truly wild, what LSU is trying to do. With two first-year Power 5 play callers, in essence, DJ Mangus, along with Jake PEETZ. Ed Orgeron should have stopped this you call third down, Jake PEETZ calls first and second down, and if it's a third down run, Jake, you call that too. That's a really crazy thing to do with coordinators that are struggling. And it does make you think long and hard about how often LSU struggled to get the play call in. Now, a lot of that is just on Jake PEETZ, but Jake PEETZ is a sharp enough guy to know to speed it the you-know-what up. I think a big reason why the play calling has been so clunky is that there is too much clutter. And I cannot say this enough. This is wild. There's too much that happens during the course of a game where when third down comes around, someone else completely different signals in the play call, which can cause delay of game penalties. It also makes me really think about the random 3rd and 7 runs we saw at 3 different instances in the first half. If Jake PEETZ is the one that calls the runs, well, did he want to call runs on third down just so he can have the reins to call the play? It does make you rethink a lot when you hear a story such as that one. But the bottom line remains the same. Ed Orgeron tried to recreate the 2019 offense, and he literally said it just out there to a T. he legit tried to do it this year with this play calling nonsense. That worked in 2019. That's great. But after the UCLA game and after even the McNeese game, what should have happened was Ed Orgeron should have gone to Jake PEETZ and DJ Mangus and say, look, Jake, let's try a game where you are the only one calling the plays, and let's see what happens. Because, look, I spoke, once again, this was a different offensive coordinator who told me this. He said he would feel handcuffed if he did not have control over what was actually being called on third down. He finds it pretty wild to even think about. And when you really think about it, it does make a lot of sense. It also brings into question why LSU has struggled to go tempo at times, because there is so many different moving parts. And it's kind of crazy because at press conferences this year, there has been some animosity thrown towards Jake PEETZ, which, once again, I want to bring back the media aspect of all of this, right? Once again, broadcasters who are calling the game that week get to meet with the coaches. It's a little bit more laid back, but never are the coordinators made available to the media. And I just like that. I just think more access for you, especially considering these coordinators at major Power 5 universities. Some schools do it. Clemson does it. Missouri does it. And some schools don't make their coordinators made available to the media every week. At least every once in a while, let's at least hear from Durante Jones and Jake PEETZ. But I do digress. But I just think it would be very nice to see just Jake PEETZ call the plays. If that is indeed what is happening, maybe Tom Hart and Cole Kubelik were just fed some information from Jake PEETZ that is not at all true, or whatever. I don't know what's true. I don't know what's not. The bottom line, though, let's just say this is happening, and I highly doubt that Jake PEETZ just made it up, and I highly doubt Tom Hart and Cole Kubelik just made it up. Let's just say that is happening. I would love to see a situation where just Jake PEETZ is calling the plays. Now, it doesn't help that there was quite a lot of calamity that happened in that press conference yesterday with Ed Orgeron that complicates Jake PEETZ's situation even more so because, of course, and I will say this, I did have a full video lined up today from all the craziness that came from the Ed Orgeron press conference, and we're just focusing, of course, on this third down thing today. But I cannot get over how much this Garrett Nussmeier redshirt thing blows my mind and how poorly this has been handled by O as well. But as an offensive play caller, when you know you don't have a backup quarterback that could be available, what is he doing? What is he not? Are we redshirting him? Are we not? That also adds an extra layer to what you can and cannot do. And it doesn't help that Ed Orgeron has made some very interesting comments about the 4-3 and the 3-4 that also puts into question what LSU has been doing previous. So maybe, let's just say LSU is doing the current third down thing where Mangus is calling third downs if it's a pass, and PEETZ is calling third downs if it's a run, which kind of sort of makes those 3rd and 7 runs. LSU did that 3 separate times. It kind of sort of makes those runs look very interesting now that we know this information. I don't know. But that's the thing. As a play caller, knowing that you may or may not call the third down play, it definitely plays in a major role into what you do on 1st and 2nd down. And then, of course, what you can or cannot potentially do on 4th. And by the way, who the heck actually calls 4th? Once again, I cannot get over how much of a mess this is. And just because it worked in 2019, because you had the perfect set of coaches and the perfect quarterback and the perfect set of skill guys, doesn't mean that that's going to work now when you're far more limited in every one of those things I just listed in every shape, form, and fashion. So, yes, this is undoubtedly on Ed Orgeron because he should have moved off this thing, and he just didn't. He just didn't. But what do I know? Hope you enjoyed this video today. Once again, maybe all of that was just made up. Maybe I'm totally wrong. I sincerely doubt it, right? And I understand we want to blame a whole lot of the offensive struggles on so many different people, but I would say, once again, the question that I put at the beginning of the video, should you put more of the blame on the offense on Jake PEETZ or Ed Orgeron? I would still say Ed O. I really would, because he hired someone that wasn't ready for the job, and number two, he made that job a lot more harder than it needed to be. So I am begging, if this is indeed the case, just let Jake PEETZ call the plays. And let's see what happens. It is Power Hour LSU. Boom! We're averaging lower than 6 yards per play for the second straight year. That is embarrassing. And we're doing some pizza tonight. Deep dish. Let's go.